They loomed above him in the railcar, 3 giant sisters, with voices like thunder and eyes that dared him to run. When the eldest whispered, "You'll fill all our wombs," it left only one question: had he stumbled into a curse, or a destiny stranger than anything the frontier had ever seen? The sun burned low over the jagged ridges of Drybell Canyon, painting the land in long strokes of gold and rust. Dust rolled up from the hooves of a bay stallion, as its rider, Calder Boone, pulled rein at the crest of a hill. Below stretched the property he had just bought, a lonely stretch of grassland, a trickling creek, and, strangest of all, an abandoned railroad car squatting crooked on a strip of warped tracks that led nowhere. Calder spat in the dirt. The price had been laughably cheap, too cheap for land with water and grazing, in a county starved for both. He remembered the seller's eyes, jittery and relieved, as if unloading a burden rather than closing a deal. "You can have it, Boone," the man had said, "but don't ask questions." Questions gnawed anyway. Why would anyone leave a rail car here? The iron wheels were half buried in earth, the paint peeled to ghostly streaks. Its windows had been boarded with mismatched planks, though gaps revealed faint shadows stirring inside. Calder swung down from the saddle, his spurs clinking on stone. He'd been a drifter for too long, dodging debts, working cattle for wages that never lasted, sleeping under more stars than roofs. This land was supposed to mark a turning point, a place of his own, finally. But that box of iron and wood sitting in the heart of it, it pulsed with a wrongness that made the back of his neck prickle. The wind shifted. A low sound, like a groan, slid out from the railcar's seams. Calder froze. His hand drifted to the colt on his hip, though he didn't draw. The stallion snorted and stamped nervously, as if warning him to mount up and ride on. Instead, he stepped forward. The dry grass whispered around his boots. A voice low, feminine, but thick as thunderclouds rolled out from the dark slit of a window. "You bought this land." Calder stiffened. The voice was too deep to be just one woman, and yet it wasn't an echo. More like 3 voices pressed into one. "Who's there?" Calder called. His voice carried steady, but his chest tightened. Silence. Then movement. The boards rattled. A hand, no, not a hand, a giant hand, slid out between the slats, its fingers long enough to wrap around a fence post. Sunlight caught the skin. Pale, calloused, unmistakably human but impossibly large. Calder stumbled back a step, heart kicking against his ribs. He had seen big men in his day, but nothing like this. The boards creaked wider. A face appeared, shadowed but vast, eyes glinting like lanterns in the gloom. Then another, just behind it. Then a third. And together, the voices came again, layered and resonant, shaking Calder more than the thunder of 100 hooves. "You'll fill all our wombs." The canyon fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Calder Boone, cowboy, drifter, survivor, stood rooted, staring at the impossible truth that his cheap purchase had not been empty land at all. What would you do if you were Calder right away? Or face what waits inside that railcar? Let us know in the comments below. Calder's hand hovered near his revolver, though some part of him knew the weapon wouldn't matter. Not against them. The 3 faces shifted closer to the railcar's cracked slats, their eyes gleaming with a hunger that wasn't only physical. Each face resembled the other: broad cheeks, heavy brows, lips fuller than any frontier woman he'd ever seen. But they weren't identical. One's gaze was sharp and calculating, another's softened with something almost childlike, and the last burned with a fiery boldness that made Calder's skin crawl. What did you say?" His voice faltered, caught between disbelief and the instinct to run. The tallest of them leaned forward, her words deliberate, each syllable rattling through the boards. "You'll fill all our wombs." Calder stepped back so quickly he nearly tripped on a stone. His stallion jerked at the reins, wide-eyed, wanting no part of this madness. He forced a harsh laugh, though his throat felt dry as desert bones. I reckon you've got the wrong man. I came here for pasture. Not for us? The gentle-eyed sister interrupted. Her voice was low but tinged with sadness, almost a plea. We've waited so long. Waited for what? Calder asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. For you. The bold one pressed her face closer, teeth flashing white through the shadows. A man fool enough or desperate enough to claim this cursed ground. Cursed. The word hit Calder harder than their first demand. Suddenly, the cheap price, the seller's shifty relief, it all made sense. This wasn't just unwanted land, it was a trap, and he'd stepped right into it. Now hold on, Calder said, raising both hands in a gesture of uneasy peace. I ain't looking for trouble. If this is your place, This is no one's place, the calculating sister cut in. Her voice was sharp as a knife's edge. The rail laid here was abandoned. Men left us to rot, to starve, but we did not die. We endured. Calder's stomach twisted. How long have you been out here? Years, the gentle one whispered. Hidden, hated, feared. Her eyes, luminous in the dark, held his with a sorrow so deep it made his chest ache in spite of his fear. The bold one broke the silence with a sudden laugh that rattled the car's frame. Now a man stands before us. Strong, alone, ours. They pressed closer to the gaps, and Calder could see now these weren't tricks of light. Their shoulders were broad as oxen, their hands big enough to snap a wagon wheel. Giants. Flesh and bone, but stretched beyond the measure of common folk. Calder's mind raced. He could mount up, spur the stallion, and never look back. Or he could draw his gun. Though bullets might only anger them, yet some thread of curiosity, some stubborn spark, rooted him to the spot. What happens if I say no? He asked quietly. The calculating sister's smile widened, cold and deliberate. Then we take it. The air inside the canyon seemed thicker now, heavy with the strange weight of their words. Calder's fingers brushed his holster, but he didn't draw. Something about the way the gentle-eyed sister looked at him, sad, almost pleading, stayed his hand. You say this land ain't yours, Calder said slowly, voice tight. But you've lived here all the same. Why? The calculating one leaned forward, her gaze sharp as glass. Because it is all we were left. The bold one pressed her palm against the wooden boards, the impact rattling the railcar on its rusted wheels. They brought us here to build a future. Said men would come. Said trains would never stop running. But men lie. Her words cracked like a whip. Calder flinched, but his curiosity dragged him closer despite his fear. The gentle one's voice softened, almost breaking. We were children when the tracks came. Our father worked the rail. Our mother cooked for the crew. We were normal once. Not like this. Not giants, Calder murmured, the word tasting strange on his tongue. Number. The calculating one's eyes narrowed. Something changed. The river we drank from. The food left to spoil. Or perhaps it was always in our blood. By the time the railmen abandoned this line, we had outgrown our mother's arms, outgrown every doorway. Her words fell into the silence like stones dropped into a well. Calder felt the truth of it, as impossible as it sounded. He'd seen strange things on the frontier, men with silver eyes from mercury mines, children born with twisted limbs after floods, but never this. They left us here, the gentle one whispered, tears brimming in eyes too large, too human. Locked us inside this car. Said no town would have us. Monsters, they called us. We have hidden ever since. The bold one's face hardened. Hidden, yes, but we survived. No man dared step too close, until you. Calder's mouth went dry. The weight of their stares pressed on him, equal parts hunger and hope. So you've been here. What? 10, 15 years? Longer. The calculating one's smile was thin, humorless. Long enough for whispers to turn to legends. Long enough for the land to be called cursed. Calder's stallion snorted, ears flat, as though the animal felt every ounce of dread Calder tried to swallow down. He wiped a hand over his mouth, thinking. 3 sisters, giants by some cruel twist of fate, trapped and abandoned in a rusting box of iron and wood, cut off from the world, growing harder and hungrier with each year. And now, Calder said carefully, you think I've come to fix that? To give you what you were denied? The bold one bared her teeth in a grin, her voice rumbling like distant thunder. Not think, Cowboy. No. The canyon wind moaned through the grass, carrying with it a chill Calder could not shake. For the first time in years, he wondered if he had finally stumbled on something too big, too strange, even for a man like him to face alone. Calder Boone stood in the canyon grass, boots rooted, heart pounding like hooves across dry earth. The sisters' eyes followed his every twitch, each gaze heavy enough to pin a man in place. You say you've endured, Calder said, his voice careful as if he were talking down a rattler. But I reckon hiding in that box ain't much of a life. The calculating sister tilted her head, the boards groaning as her massive shoulders pressed against them. We endured by choice. We stayed because the world would not suffer us. And yet we've carved out something stronger than life. The bold one cut in, her tone sharp as a spur. But survival alone is not enough. The gentle one pressed her enormous hands against the planks, fingers curling through the cracks. We are 3. We are alone. We cannot remain so forever. Calder's throat tightened. He thought of his own wandering years' camps beneath the stars, women's faces that faded like smoke, promises never kept. Loneliness was no stranger to him, but this was a loneliness swollen to monstrous size. What exactly are you asking? He managed. The bold one's lips pulled into a grin that chilled him more than any winter wind. Stay. Claim this land with us. Guard it. In return, we guard you. Our strength is yours. And if I don't? Calder asked, his hand brushing the butt of his Colt. The calculating one's eyes glittered. Then you leave, but you leave broken. No man walks away with our secret and keeps his tongue. Her words landed like the click of a hammer pulled back. Calder felt his stallion tug at the reins, desperate to flee. He forced his voice steady. Sounds less like a deal and more like a threat. The gentle one's voice rose, soft, but desperate. Not threat, need. We cannot live without a man's presence. Not anymore. The silence that followed pressed down like the desert heat. Calder's pulse thudded in his ears. He could ride, he could risk a bullet or worse, and pray the legends about cursed land would keep others away. Or he could stay and gamble on the strangest alliance the frontier had ever seen. You'd scare off any rustler. I'll give you that, he muttered, half to himself. The bold one's grin widened. We've done it before. Trespassers run screaming, bandits crushed beneath our fists. The calculating one leaned closer. With you, we build more than fear. We build a claim no man can challenge. Calder weighed the Colt at his side, the stallion tugging at the reins, the 3 pairs of eyes fixed on him, like wolves waiting to pounce. Survival here meant surrendering to something beyond his understanding. He took a long breath, the canyon air dry in his lungs. If I stay, he asked, what do you want first? The bold one's answer came without hesitation, her voice booming through the cracks like a drumbeat. You give us a legacy. The words echoed against the cliffs, and Calder felt the canyon itself hold its breath. Calder Boone barely slept that night. He made camp near the creek, close enough to watch the crooked silhouette of the railcar against the moon, but far enough to grab his stallion and ride if things turned worse. The sisters hadn't emerged, though he swore he felt their eyes burning through the slats, watching, waiting. At dawn, he built a small fire for coffee. The silence of Drybell Canyon hung thick until it wasn't silent anymore. The faint jingle of tack, the groan of wagon wheels, the clipped laughter of men carried on the wind. Calder's hand went to his Colt. Trouble. From the rise, he spotted them. 4 riders, rough-looking, lean from the saddle, eyes scanning for easy pickings. Rustlers. He knew the type, always circling lonely ranges, hungry for cattle, horses, or anything they could haul off. Calder cursed under his breath. He had no herd to steal yet, but a lone cowboy with a fresh claim was sport enough. And worse, the railcar. If they saw it, if they saw them, the riders spotted him first. They whooped and spurred down the slope, dust pluming around them. Calder drew his Colt, but 4-1 was suicide. He backed toward the car, the sister's cursed shadow his only cover. Well, well, one rustler jeered, teeth flashing under a sweat-stained hat. A man staked himself some fine land, shamed to see it wasted on one drifter. Another rider spat. We'll take the horse, maybe your boots. The rest you can keep. The bold voice thundered from the railcar before Calder could speak. Number, he is ours. The riders reined up, startled, eyes darting. Who's there? The boards groaned. Then, with a splintering crack, the bold sister shoved the door wide. Sunlight poured over her massive frame as she crouched to step through. Calder's gut nodded. She was larger in daylight than he dared imagine. Shoulders broad as a doorway, hands like sledgehammers. The rustlers froze. Then one barked a nervous laugh. What in God's name? Hell itself, another whispered. The calculating sister followed, her movements deliberate, towering above the wagon. The gentle one trailed, her sorrowful gaze fixed not on the men, but on Calder, as though asking if this was proof enough. The rustlers panicked. One fired a shot, wild, cracking harmlessly against iron. The bold sister lunged. Her hand closed around the shooter, plucking him from the saddle as if he were a doll. His scream tore across the canyon before she hurled him into the dust. Another spurred his horse, trying to flee, but the calculating one reached out and seized the animal's bridle, snapping leather straps like thread. The rider tumbled, scrambling back only to find her shadow blotting out the sun. The last two tried to rally, guns shaking, but Calder stepped in, Colt raised. Don't! His voice was iron. She ain't bluffin'. The rustlers' resolve shattered. They fled, abandoning horses and gear, dust tails vanishing into the canyon. Silence fell heavy again. The bold sister wiped blood from her palm, smiling down at Calder. We told you. With us, you are safe. Calder holstered his Colt, unsettled. Safe for now. But what if their fury ever turned his way? The bodies of the rustlers were gone by sunrise. The bold sister had dragged them into the hills, as if hauling sacks of flour, while the other two pried the wrecked wagon apart for scrap. Calder had watched it all in silence, the taste of iron still sharp in his throat. He told himself he should be gone by now, ride out, never look back. But something rooted him there, stronger than fear. By midday, Calder was working the creek, stacking stones to make a crude dam for watering a future herd. He stole glances at the sisters. The bold one stripped bark from fallen trees, snapping trunks across her knee to fashion fence posts. The calculating one laid them in straight lines, with startling precision. The gentle one knelt by Calder's fire, fumbling clumsily with his coffee pot until it crumpled in her massive hands. She wept softly, ashamed, until Calder fetched another tin and showed her how to hold it carefully. You see? He said, his voice low, steady, slow, and gentle. Ain't no shame in learning. Her enormous eyes lit up, and for a moment she looked less like a monster and more like a lonely soul starved for kindness. Days stretched into weeks. Calder began to see patterns. The bold sister was quick to anger, quick to laugh, always first to demand his company. The calculating one studied him like a hawk, testing every word, every glance, as though measuring whether he was worth the gamble. And the gentle one, she shadowed him quietly, carrying buckets, tending the fire, humming in a voice that made the canyon feel strangely less empty. At night, Calder built his bedroll by the creek. He'd catch the glow of their eyes through the slats of the railcar, watching him. Sometimes, He thought he heard whispers, not words exactly, but murmurs thick with longing. "You're becoming theirs," he muttered one night, staring at the stars, like a calf claimed at branding. Still, he didn't ride away. Part of him felt tethered, as if the canyon itself would not let him go. One evening, he returned from scouting fence lines, to find the bold sister waiting outside the car. She crouched low, her massive frame blotting out the setting sun. "You work like a man with purpose," she said, teeth flashing in the dim light. "Yet you still doubt us." Calder set down his rifle. "Doubt's what keeps a man breathing." She leaned closer, so close the heat of her breath stirred his hair. "Doubt us too long, and you will forget the world beyond this canyon." The calculating one emerged behind her, eyes sharp. "He will stay. He must. No town would suffer us. But with him our claim becomes unbreakable." The gentle one stepped forward last, her voice breaking like soft rain. "Please, don't leave." Calder stood there, three shadows looming over him, their need as heavy as chains. For the first time, he wondered if he was truly a partner in this bargain, or a prisoner bound by it. Drybell Canyon had a way of swallowing secrets, but not forever. Calder rode into the nearest town, Ash Fork Crossing, with a pack mule of supplies and a head full of uneasy silence. He thought maybe he could keep the sisters hidden, just another lonely rancher scratching out a living. But whispers move quicker than dust, and folks already eyed him with a strange curiosity. At the mercantile, old Mrs. Hartley leaned across the counter, her voice sharp as a sewing needle. "Boone, you been out there near that abandoned track, ain't you?" Calder stiffened. "What of it?" Lance cursed. She spat in the corner for emphasis. "Folks been hearing things. Groans in the night. Shadows bigger'n barns. You'd do well to pack up before it swallows you, too." Others listened in. A ranch hand muttered. "Saw Boone's Creek yesterday. Looked like fence posts sprouted overnight. No man alone works that fast." Calder felt the heat of their suspicion pressing in. He paid for his flour and beans quick, but on the street, the whispers followed. By the time he reached the saloon, the story had grown legs. Boone wasn't alone in Drybell Canyon. Something or someone helped him. That night, the town gathered in the saloon, whiskey and rumor thick in the air. A young cowhand swore he'd seen a figure the size of two men stalking the ridge. Another claimed the canyon echoed with women's voices, low and strange. Each tale stoked fear like a poker in hot coals. By the second round of drinks, the talk had sharpened into threat. "If Boone's harboring devils," a farmer growled, "we can't let 'em fester. What if they wander into town?" "Or breed," another spat. "Imagine a whole brood of giants trampling our land." The word hung heavy. Breed. And Calder's stomach twisted. He knew too well what the sisters had asked of him. He stood in the doorway, hat low, every eye swinging his way. "You folks got long tongues for things you ain't seen," he said evenly. "My land's mine. Nothing there for any of you to fret over." But fear doesn't bow to reason. Sheriff Dake himself rose, chewing his mustache like rope. "Boone, if there's truth to these tales, you best speak it plain. My job's to keep this town safe." Calder met his gaze. "And my job's to mind my own. You'd do best to do the same." It was the wrong answer. He felt it, in the shift of the room, the hardening eyes, the scrape of chairs. Men who once tipped their hats, now muttered darkly into their whiskey. By the time Calder rode out at dawn, the decision was made not by him, but by the town. They'd come to Drybell Canyon. They'd see for themselves. And if what they found matched their fears, blood would follow. Back at the railcar, the sisters waited, their giant faces lit by the rising sun. The bold one grinned, teeth flashing. "They will come, won't they?" Calder dismounted, jaw tight. "Aye, and they won't be bringing peace." The dust cloud rose before Calder heard the horses. He was splitting firewood by the creek when the first faint rumble echoed off the canyon walls. By the time he straightened, Axe still in hand, a dozen riders crested the ridge. They carried rifles across their saddles, their faces hard under the morning sun. Calder cursed under his breath. They've come sooner than I reckoned. The sisters had already sensed it. The bold one stood outside the railcar, massive arms crossed, her grin wicked as a wolf's passet. The calculating one crouched low, scanning the ridges like a general plotting lines of fire. The gentle one lingered behind them, wringing her enormous hands, fear shadowing her face. The posse rode straight to the edge of Calder's claim. Sheriff Dake led them, his badge flashing in the light. "Boone!" he bellowed. "Step aside. We're here to see what manner of creatures you've got penned up in that car." Calder planted his boots in the dirt. "Ain't penned up. They're people." That sparked laughter, bitter and cruel. A farmer sneered. "People don't stand taller than wagons." The bold sister's voice thundered across the canyon. "Come closer, little men. See if your courage matches your tongues." The posse's horses shied at her booming words. Men gripped reins tighter, rifles rising with shaking hands. Sheriff Dake spat. "Whatever they are, they don't belong here. Folks are scared, Boone. You let 'em stay. You're putting us all in danger." Calder's colt felt heavy on his hip. He glanced back at the sisters, their massive frames bristling with tension, and then at the line of townsfolk, faces twisted with fear. He knew one spark could set the canyon ablaze. "I won't hand 'em over," Calder said at last, voice flat as hammered iron. "This land's mine. They stay." Murmurs rippled through the posse. One man couldn't contain himself. He fired a shot into the air. The sound cracked across the canyon, and the sisters moved as one. The bold one lunged, snatching the rifleman clean off his saddle. His scream cut short as she slammed him into the dirt. Horses reared, men shouted. The calculating sister swept a hand across a second rider, swatting him from his horse like a rag doll. The gentle one cried out, covering her ears, but even she struck the ground with such force that the earth trembled, scattering men like chaff. Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off the railcar's iron shell. Calder drew his Colt and fired not at the townsfolk, but into the sky. "Hold your damn fire," he roared. "You'll only get yourselves killed." But fear had no ears. Smoke filled the air. Horses screamed. Men scrambled. By the time the dust cleared, 3 riders were down, and the rest were fleeing back toward Ashfork Crossing, terror snapping at their heels. Sheriff Dake lingered just long enough to shout over his shoulder, "This ain't over, Boone. You've chosen monsters over men. The town won't forgive it." Calder lowered his Colt, chest heaving. Behind him, the bold sister laughed. The calculating one smirked, and the gentle one wept. Calder looked from their towering forms to the trail of dust vanishing into the horizon. Ashfork Crossing would return. Next time, they'd bring more than rifles. The canyon lay quiet after the fight, but it was the uneasy quiet of a battlefield after the smoke clears. Calder walked among the churned earth, boot soles crunching over dropped cartridges and broken rifle stocks. He had driven cattle through storms, faced down men with quicker tempers than sense, but nothing in his years compared to the sight of 3 giant sisters standing guard over him like ironclad sentinels. The bold one sat on a boulder, grinning with pride. "They came with rifles," she said, licking blood from her knuckles. "And still, they ran." The calculating one paced the railcar's length, sharp eyes scanning the ridges, as if the posse might return any moment. "They'll be back, next time with more men, and fire." The gentle one lingered near Calder, her huge shoulders slumped. "They hate us. Always have. Always will." Her voice broke. "And now they'll hate you too." Calder holstered his Colt and sighed. "Hate don't weigh much compared to hunger. What matters is we're still standin'." He said it more for himself than for them. Over the next days, something shifted. The sisters left the railcar more often, their massive forms looming over the canyon as they hauled logs, dug post holes, and reinforced the creek dam. Calder found himself working beside them not as master nor prisoner, but something in between. The bold one laughed often, her voice booming across the ridges. She shadowed Calder most closely, teasing, testing, daring him to flinch, when her giant hand brushed his shoulder. The calculating one questioned him relentlessly. How many bullets did he have left? How strong were the town's walls? What alliances could be bought with cattle or coin? She treated him like a partner in strategy, though her eyes never softened. But it was the gentle one who lingered longest in Calder's thoughts. She crouched by his fire at night, careful with the tin cup he'd taught her to hold, humming low songs that echoed off the canyon walls. Once, she reached out a trembling finger to trace the brim of his hat. "So small," she whispered, "yet you stayed." Calder swallowed hard, unsure whether to pull back or lean in. Instead, he did neither, letting the silence answer for him. At night, he lay awake by the creek, listening to the sisters murmur in their railcar. Their voices carried on the wind, sometimes fierce, sometimes tender, always circling the same theme: him. He had become their anchor, their claim on a world that wanted them erased. One evening, as the fire crackled low, the calculating one crouched beside him. Her massive face filled his vision. "Understand this, Boone," she said, her words sharp as cut glass. "You are not guest. You are not prisoner. You are ours. You belong here, with us." Calder met her gaze, his gut twisted with equal parts dread and strange belonging. He had come to Drybell Canyon looking for land. Instead, he had found a family he never asked, for 3 giants bound by blood, and now binding him. Whether he liked it or not, Calder Boone was theirs. The days after the skirmish blurred into tense routine. Calder worked the creek, mended fences, and rode the ridges with his rifle, knowing each sunrise carried the weight of approaching reckoning. The sisters grew restless, pacing the canyon like caged lions. They had fought off rustlers and routed townsfolk, but Calder knew the frontier always had a bigger beast waiting. It arrived in the form of a polished coach, rolling up the canyon trail one blistering afternoon. Dust curled behind it, wheels creaking, harness jingling. Calder's gut sank the instant he saw the gleam of brass fittings. No rancher owned such finery. This was railroad. The coach halted near the warped track. A tall man stepped out, trim beard, crisp suit, eyes cold as coins. He carried papers in one hand, authority in the other. "Boone," he called, voice sharp as steel rails. "I represent the Union and Western. This car, these tracks, and the ground beneath them remain company property. You've squatted long enough." Calder's hand rested on his Colt, though he didn't draw. "I paid for this land fair. Deed signed." The man sneered. "Deeds bend beneath iron law. The company wants this canyon reopened. Traffic, progress, profit." His gaze shifted to the railcar, where shadows shifted behind the slats. "And I've heard stories that you're harboring things best left to dust." The bold sister stepped into the light, towering above the coach, her grin feral. "Things?" she thundered. "We are not things." The railroad man flinched, though he masked it with a sneer. "Good Lord." He stumbled back a pace, then rallied. "All the more reason. This abomination cannot remain. I'll return with soldiers, with dynamite if need be. No one will stop us." The calculating sister crouched low, her enormous eyes locking onto his. "Bring them. We will crush them as we crush the others." The gentle one whimpered, tears shining in the corners of her vast eyes. "No more killing, please." Calder stepped between them, chest tight, heart hammering. He'd fought lawmen, faced rustlers, but soldiers and railroads were something else. They didn't bend easy. They came with numbers, with orders, with the weight of the nation behind them. Still, he looked the company man dead in the eye. "You bring soldiers, you'd best bring coffins. This canyon's claimed." The man's lips curled. "Then it'll be your grave." He snapped his fingers. The coach rolled back down the trail, dust swallowing him, but his threat lingered heavier than thunderclouds. As the echo faded, Calder turned to the sisters. The bold one laughed, eager for battle. The calculating one smirked, already scheming. The gentle one wept. Calder stared at them all, then at the crooked railcar that had become his home. He knew what the railroad's return meant. Not a skirmish, not a mob, but war. And the only way forward was to embrace the bond he had tried to deny. "They'll be back," he muttered. "And when they come, we stand together." The sisters leaned close, their voices a rumble of thunder. Together! The canyon braced itself in silence. Weeks passed, and though the railroad man's threat hung heavy, no soldiers came not yet. Calder knew they would. Progress always returned to claim what it thought belonged to it. But until that day, Drybell Canyon stood untouched. The sisters lingered outside the railcar more often now, their massive shadows stretching across the grass at sundown. Calder worked among them, no longer as stranger, not quite as equal, but bound all the same. He built fences with the calculating one, laughed in spite of himself at the bold one's booming jests, and found strange comfort in the gentle one's quiet songs that drifted across the creek at dusk. Sometimes, he caught himself staring at the horizon, wondering if he was fool, prisoner, or something else entirely. Then he'd look back at the crooked railcar, at the giants who had claimed him as fiercely as they claimed the canyon, and he knew the truth. He had come seeking land. Instead, he had found a family. The people of Ash Fork Crossing spoke his name with dread now, whispering of the cursed cowboy who lay with monsters, but fear kept them away. And so Calder Boone, loner, drifter, survivor, carved a life out of the strangest bargain the frontier had ever known. Together, they waited for the day when soldiers, fire, and iron rails would come grinding back into Drybell Canyon. And when that day came, Calder swore they would not find a broken man or forgotten giants. They would find a family, fierce and unyielding, ready to defend the legacy they had built. For better or worse, it was theirs. Forever. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.